Yay Networks.
I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. This week's episode of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition is about breast cancer and nutrition, eating to beat the odds. And this is a two-part podcast. You're listening to part 2 right now. And we are covering strategies that have been shown. These are evidence-based strategies to help reduce risk of breast cancer. In this week's episode, we're exploring the do's and don'ts of nutrition when it comes to breast cancer prevention, including food and supplements like flaxseed, tea, artificial sweeteners, and supplements like vitamin D, probiotics, mushrooms, and multivitamins. And if you missed part 1, you'll definitely want to check out last week's episode. We covered the keto diet and how a low-carb diet influences our cancer risk and cancer treatment. We talked about the pros and cons of soy, and we uncovered how and why extra body fat actually plays an active role in breast cancer risk, and we explored the facts, whether we like them or not, about alcohol and estrogen production. Our guest for this 2-part special podcast on breast cancer and nutrition is oncology nutrition expert Laura Kerns. Laura is a registered dietitian and certified specialist in oncology nutrition and is the senior clinical dietitian at the Ochsner Cancer Institute here in New Orleans. She has spent the last 8 years working exclusively in oncology and is a wealth of knowledge on the latest science related to nutrition and cancer prevention. So Laura, we covered a lot in part 1 of our breast cancer nutrition podcast. You've added so much clarity for me, and I know our listeners as well. So what do we want to talk about next?
You know, once I get through all the hard stuff,
doomsday,
stop eating sugar, stop drinking alcohol, and people haven't left my office, and then we start talking about what we should eat. So that's something, we've alluded to this plant-based eating, but what are some of the specifics? What are some foods I can focus on and make sure that I do include in my diet?
So what are some of the things nutritionally that people may not know about or may not think about?
I think there's some really interesting information out there about flax seeds. One thing a lot of my patients don't realize when they come in, they might be incorporating flax seeds, but they're the whole flax seeds, and your body doesn't digest and absorb those very well.
You're basically pooping out
right.
those whole seeds.
The whole seeds, yeah.
The shell is so hard.
Exactly.
We can't break it down. We can't digest it.
Exactly. So what you're really looking for is that flax meal or ground flax. And one really cool way that I like to incorporate it into the diet is actually flax eggs. So adding a couple tablespoons of water to a tablespoon of flax, and you can bake with it, or you can substitute eggs, with the flax.
It's basically an egg replacer. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for a vegan alternative to eggs, that little blend she's talking about, it's kind of a little slurry, would be your egg replacer.
Exactly. And of course, it works great in certain things, but if you want to put it, say, in yogurt or anything like that, you can just scoop the ground flax in there. It goes great in smoothies. That's one great spot to put it where you don't necessarily notice the little texture change.
Just make sure you floss after. Yeah.
And especially if you're on Zoom all day.
Right. No one's around you to tell you. But smoothies, if you're doing like some sort of a hot cereal, like oats, or like you said, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, it works well to kind of just sprinkle over things. And the flax meal, sometimes you'll see it called ground flaxseed or sometimes flax meal. I've had clients who buy the whole flax seeds and they want to grind it themselves in a coffee grinder, which to me, there's so much available already done for us. But if you want to do that, you can.
More power to you.
But the flax seeds are one of the top food sources of lignans, and lignans are protective against breast cancer.
Correct. So there's studies that show no difference, and then there's studies that show that there is a positive change. So I think it's just something that we already know is healthy. It has great healthy fats in it. There's no reason not to include it. If it's going to be potentially yes, then I would go for it.
And would you say a tablespoon or 2 a day as it works
Yes.
to just sprinkle it into stuff?
Absolutely. Breakfast is usually the easiest because, like you said, it can go in oats, it can go in smoothies. There's kind of those simple breakfast foods that it works great in.
And what about different types of fats? Saturated fat. So flaxseed has as a plant-based version of omega-3 fats.
Correct.
And let's talk other types of fats, because there is a perception about saturated fat, animal saturated fat, and cancer. So talk to us about that and which ones you would recommend, steer clear of, all of that.
I usually try to definitely limit the saturated fat intake, particularly from animal sources. There's, conflicting things about coconut with that being such a saturated fat, but I'm less concerned about plant-based saturated fats as I am animal-based. So if you're taking a lot of things like red meats out of your diet, or at least limiting it to, grass-fed, where the fat profile changes a little bit, you'll get a better profile. One of the things you definitely want to include is those omega-3s. So you mentioned that the flax have the plant-based omega-3s. So then you also want to think about things like fish. So I definitely talk to all my patients about incorporating fatty fish into their diet. And if they don't like fish or allergic to fish, something like that, if it's safe, then they can do a fish oil. Usually those are purified enough that they won't cause an allergic reaction. So fish oil supplements, I think, can be used a lot in oncology and cancer. The reason for that is kind of multifold. So it can help with cancer prevention. And then a lot of us with, a typical Western diet, we have this imbalance of the types of fats in our diet. So if you're looking at a traditional Western diet, we have a ton of omega-6 in our diets and not a lot of omega-3. And the more you balance that ratio, the better it is for cancer prevention and other chronic disease prevention. There's also some interesting new research coming out that omega-3s might actually help with response rates to chemotherapy and tolerances to chemotherapy. So it seems to be at about 2 grams a day is pretty safe, and that's something you could incorporate into your treatment plan.
So if you're eating several ounces of salmon a day, you're easily going to get your 2 grams. Can you walk us through some of the other types of fish that you would recommend, or that are kind of the most crowd pleasers with your patients?
So unfortunately, the other great source of fatty fish with omega-3s is tuna, but most people eat tuna steaks, and most people eat those, seared and pretty raw. And usually with chemotherapy, we don't recommend raw fish. But that would be a great way to get it. So a lot of my patients use the supplemental form because they don't want to eat salmon every single night.
Or sardines
yes.
or something like that.
Again, not a big crowd pleaser.
Yeah. And my dad loves them though. He'll just open the can up right there and eat them out of the can. And supplements, 2 grams is easy to see, and you can look at that on the label and you can see, you would look at your EPA and DHA and the fish oil, add it up. I usually encourage you to turn the bottle over and look at what's on the back, because sometimes what's listed as the weight on the front includes the weight of other fillers in that capsule. So you want to look and see how much of the actual omega-3 is on that label. And for fish oil, it's EPA, DHA. There are vegan supplements for DHA and EPA that you can get, and they're algae derived.
Yes.
So if you are vegan and you go, okay, I really want to get those in supplement form, but I don't want the fish oil, you can still find vegan DHA, EPA.
Yes, absolutely.
And so limiting our animal fats as possible, but not necessarily following a low-fat diet. That would not be the recommendation, but
Correct.
more let's switch these to more plant-based fats.
Yes.
So plant oils, olive oil, avocado, nuts, seeds.
Yes, absolutely.
Nut butters.
Yeah. So we talk about that a lot. I have to get rid of the fat fear, as we
Yeah.
call it. Everybody ever since the 80s has been on this fat is bad, do everything low fat. And then we went to keto, but then that went to high saturated fat and a lot of meat and everything. So yeah, it's more about plant fats. So you have your avocados, you have nuts, you have nut butters, you have pumpkin seeds are really big right now. So that's really fun. Sunflower butter, all those different options are great plant fats. And for my patients who are having difficulty keeping their weight up during treatment, those are really great options to get the calories up. And they're always like, but that's so much fat. And it's that's okay.
Yeah. How much do you still experience people having kind of that fear of it? Is it still something that's pretty common?
I don't think that it's a conscious fear. It's just that when you go through what they're eating with them, it's fat-free yogurt, and it's, it's like a unconscious effort to avoid things that are high in fat. So when you're trying to retrain the mind to be like, it's okay to eat avocados and nuts and all these things that are high in fat, they're like, whoa.
And I think a lot of people tend to reach for those things without a label because they're getting their avocado and having that, or they may be getting nuts from the bulk bin. But then when they see the label, oh my gosh, it has 21 grams of fat in a serving. They've been eating it and it's fine, and their weight is stable, or their weight's where it should be, or it's trending as you want it and all this stuff. But that number can freak them out still, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It still freaks me out sometimes. So.
Yeah, sometimes it is shocking. It's like, wow, that's a lot fit into a little space there.
It is.
Talking about other things. So we talked about the omega-3s. We talked about flaxseed. We haven't talked about fruits and veggies. I feel like you kind of started it out. The very first thing we said right off the bat in this podcast is plant-based is your go-to, and you encourage plant-based. So I think with that right there, there's our fruits and veggies. But is there anything that you want to say specifically? Are there certain vegetables, certain fruits? Is it more that we need to try to really make sure we get the varied color palette of them? How do you explain that to people?
So yes, when it comes to fruits and vegetables, I always get asked which are the best ones. And, because again, in pop culture, there's superfoods, and we hear superfoods all the time. And what I explain that means is that fruits and vegetables that have deep, rich colors are the ones that you want to focus on, because you get the most bang for your buck. And, especially if you might not be feeling well, or your budget is limited, whatever it might be, you can focus on those foods. So dark red, dark green, dark orange, so like sweet potatoes, for example, that dark, beautiful, rich orange color. Kale or spinach with that dark green color, blueberries with that deep color. Those are the things you want to look for. Those deeper colors have more nutrition.
I'll encourage people too that if they are eating just tons of greens, that's fantastic. But it's only one spectrum, and it's only one hue. So
exactly.
Let's do red peppers, or let's add some beets. Let's add the carrots for color. So like adding in that variety of there, and they all do represent different. And there's more and more science that's showing that vegan diets and plant-based diets are correlated to a lower risk of cancer.
Right. And that's definitely because of all those deep, rich colors that are incorporated. Now, like you said earlier, there's definitely a way to be vegan and be really unhealthy. It's possible. But typically, the reason for being vegan is focusing on plant foods, and you're getting a big variety. And that's what's key, is that variety. Like you said, if it's only green, you're only getting that one hue, which means, you might be getting vitamin E and folate and some things like that, but you're missing vitamin A and all the other vitamins that you need in your diet. And all these colors also mean different, what we call phytonutrients, which, are super powerful when it comes to cancer and cancer prevention, and even potentially treatment. We're still learning a lot about that. And if you're missing out on some of the colors, then you're missing out on some of that benefit.
I think if someone doesn't like certain vegetables, still, if you haven't tried them in a long time, try them. I mean, as we get older too, our taste buds change, and really our taste buds get a little less sensitive. And so what might have been really bitter to us, 15 years ago, or as a kid or whatever, now you're like, oh wait, I actually kind of like that now. Or maybe the way that you had it was always steamed, and it felt it tasted very pungent. But now if you have it roasted, that kind of helps a little bit, or whatever it is that you're, how are you preparing it that might be a little bit more enjoyable to you. My husband and I, and I've talked about this on this podcast before, we eat different vegetables, and we try to rotate the vegetables. But I think like many of us, we do kind of get in the rotation. It's the same 5 or 6 that we like the most, and they're easy, they're convenient for us, or anything like that. But we do a vegetable juice blend daily. And it is, it started out, it's from the Green Fork, but they have a greens juice. And so it's all their different green vegetables, and parsley, cilantro, and stuff like that. And I was like, but it's only greens. So now it's basically every single vegetable they have in the Green Fork place, they juice, and they call it balance. And so it's got beets. It also has turmeric. It has ginger. It has all of these other things in it. And it's really earthy. Someone said that it looked like the stuff you would scrape off the top of a pond because it kind of does at points. But, it's a 16-ounce bottle. We split that, and that's kind of like, okay, that's 8 ounces of very concentrated juice. And we don't have that as our vegetables. We'll have that in addition to.
Sure.
And so we might not be roasting beets on a regular basis, but we are at least getting them in that form. And so I think it's like that works for us, but it's finding what works for somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good point too, to make sure that you're saying it's the vegetables that you're juicing, because I find people get into trouble with juicing because they start throwing in a ton of fruit.
Right.
Then all of a sudden you're introducing the sugar from the fruit without all the other benefits of the fiber, for example. And then all of a sudden you're just inundating your body with sugar.
I like how you say it. I'm like, right. I'm like, yes, it's like the conspiracy, But even with the juice blend that I just told you about, my husband will be like, can't we just ask the Green Fork to do like maybe just half an apple? I'm like, well, no, because I know that the owners, Stephanie and Trey, they would be like, okay, in this big batch, we'll do half an apple. But what if it's not Stephanie and Trey? And what if we end up getting half apple juice instead? Like, I want to know that there's no apple, there's no juice, no fruit juice in there. Like, it's all vegetables, And so he's like, all right. So, but it is. And so again, if you were doing something at home, you have a little more control of it. The other thing is, if you're doing smoothies and you have been doing a lot of fruit smoothies, start to mix those up and look in your freezer section and see what fruits are in there that I could get and just kind of keep easily in there. You don't have to worry about them going bad, but also what vegetables could you throw into it? And the easiest is like a handful of spinach or kale. It makes your smoothie vivid green, or kind of murky brown, depending on what else you have in there, but you would never taste it. Like,
exactly.
It's the other stuff that you're adding is gonna kind of overtake it. So if you are a smoothie person and you've been doing kind of fruit smoothies or protein smoothies, start to think like, how could I squeeze some vegetables into this?
And one of the things I tell my patients, that I had to learn, I never liked kale, never ate kale, thought it was disgusting. And then I went to a conference where a chef did some cooking demos for us. And for raw kale, for example, like a kale salad, you have to massage the kale to get rid of that bitter taste. And you have to add a little oil and a little salt and a little acid. And then you actually massage it. And everyone's like, you massage your kale? Who are you? But I'm like, it makes it taste so much better. And so sometimes it's just knowing the right technique for the right thing.
So someone tells Laura, no, I don't like kale. And you're like, but did you massage it?
That's exactly what I tell them. And they give me crazy looks.
And then they hear you say that and they're like, that's why I like it when I go out to eat, but I don't like it when I make it myself, because they're not taking all these steps that maybe the chef is at the restaurant.
Exactly.
So earlier we were talking about dialing back the white carbs, the pastas, the white pasta, the white rice, the white stuff. And by doing that, a lot of times I think someone is doing a lower carb in efforts to follow a lower carb diet, or what they may be calling keto, but you and I are saying, it's really just low carb. They're not doing pasta, but they're doing spiralized zucchini noodles or spiralized beets or carrots or butternut squash, or they're not doing rice, but they're doing riced cauliflower or riced broccoli. Right there, you're doing exactly what we're saying as well for that cancer prevention of you're dialing back those white starches. And not only, yes, it does help you cut back on the carbs and calories, but even more importantly, it's swapping it in, you're swapping in a veg in this place. So it's like quadruple benefit with all this things.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So there's just really easy things that you might be doing anyway for one reason, but it can benefit whenever we're talking cancer prevention for another. I'd like to take a minute to talk about this week's sponsor, Orgain. So you've heard me talk a lot about collagen before. I've even done an entire podcast on the health benefits of collagen. It's something that I personally incorporate daily as a natural support for joints and tendons, first and foremost. Plus, there's the side benefits that I get for skin, nails, and hair. And I've loved and trusted the Orgain brand for years. So the fact that they now offer collagen peptides powder is an easy win-win. Orgain's collagen peptides powder is completely odorless and tasteless, so it can be mixed into any of your favorite recipes. I like to add it to smoothies or coffee or tea. It's really so versatile, you don't even know it's there. Right now, you can save 20% off your first order. Plus, when you subscribe, you can save even more. Go to tryorgain.com/fueled. That's tryorgain.com/fueled for 20% off your first order plus extra savings when you subscribe. That's tryorgain.com/fueled. Let's talk tea as well. Green tea, I always say, just gets all the glory. But really, when we look at antioxidants, it's all types of true tea that are high in antioxidants.
Right.
Talk to us about the impact of tea on cancer and specifically breast cancer risk.
So I think there's a lot of really good research. Green tea in particular gets a lot of, like you said, it gets all the glory. And that's for, a reason. It has the compound ECGC, which is definitely linked to a reduced cancer risk. And so, if I had to pick one, like if I wasn't a tea drinker and wanted to take up the habit, I would encourage you to go for the green tea. And matcha, if you've never tried matcha green tea, tends to taste a lot better than other green teas. So that's kind of a way to introduce it, but without all the sugar and the milk and everything else.
Right. Right.
So, but yes, all the teas, just kind of like how we were talking about vegetables and fruits having all these beautiful compounds that are so important and should be included in our diet for prevention. It's the same thing with tea. This is another plant. It's, another component that should be introduced into our diet that can, have an antioxidant effect in particular, and help reduce some of that oxidative stress that's in our bodies. And that can lead to cancer prevention, and breast cancer, I can't say that it's more potent for breast cancer than any other cancer. Breast cancer just gets the most research.
Yeah, true. And so I think kind of like we were just talking about, well, these white starches of rice or pasta, we could trade them out for a vegetable replacer, and it's doing that multi-benefit there. Same thing if you're drinking things that aren't fantastic, say sugar sweetened drinks, or things like Crystal Light that have just artificial sweeteners, artificial, food dyes. There's nothing that a Crystal Light type drink is doing to help you in cancer prevention, period. And so maybe you can swap that out for something like you can brew tea. And we think green tea, a cup of hot green tea, but you can do tea, brew it, have it in your fridge and have it chilled. Like basically brew a pitcher of tea,
Absolutely.
whether it's white tea, green tea, black tea. One tip I would say, if you think, oh, I've tried green tea and it's has a strong flavor. The white tea is more neutral, or you may like just regular black tea, but you can flavored teas like peach tea or fruity tea. Now, those aren't true tea. So when you're looking to get the health benefit, you're like, oh, but I love that passion fruit tea. Well, that's great to hydrate you and it's great to flavor it, but you're not getting the health benefits that Laura was talking about from those herbal teas. They're not truly from the tea leaf. So green, black, or white are what you want to get. But if you kind of want to flavor it, you could go halvesies and make a pitcher of tea and flavor it with these others.
Right. So that's what I often recommend, especially here where, iced tea is a big, big thing. And if you're doing your sweet tea or you're doing your unsweet tea, but you're putting 6 packs of sweet and low in it, I talk about exactly what you just did. I encourage them to think about, brew like strong brew of the green tea and then an herbal tea, mix the two together. Particularly like a citrus flavor goes really well with green tea. So do half and half, put it in the fridge, and then pour it over ice. And you get this beautiful flavor. And once you pour it over ice, you get the right concentration. And so that's a perfect way to do it. And you get hydrated. You get all the benefits.
And if you're doing something that you're drinking that's a vice, something like that can be instead of. Let's take a minute to talk about this week's sponsor, Sweaty Betty. So I love it when work attire can also mean athletic wear. And I recently received my first pair of Sweaty Betty power leggings, and I am loving them. No other brand can compete with the Sweaty Betty Power Leggings squat-tested compression fabric and expertly placed seams that physically shape and lift your core and your glutes. They're quick drying and they have this perfectly placed little side pocket. And you can take their quiz at sweatybetty.com to find your perfect style and to choose from a wide selection of strategically cut patterns. I'm loving Sweaty Betties, and you'll love them too. They are super buttery soft with really cute patterns. So now through November 1, you can get 20% off your entire purchase when you visit sweatybetty.com/fueled. This is the best offer Sweaty Betty has available anywhere, because no matter how hard we're training, Sweaty Betty makes it effortless to look and feel amazing before, during, and after your workout. So get 20% off your entire purchase at sweatybetty.com/fueled. Only until November 1. That's spelled sweatybetty.com/fueled. Let's talk about artificial sweeteners. What's your messaging to patients about the risk, how it affects their cancer risk, and what's the science say on that? Because there's a lot of really mixed reviews.
Yeah, there is. And I don't know the absolute right answer to that. I don't like the way I explain it is I don't put artificial things in my body. And so why would I put artificial sweeteners in, especially my patients who are trying so hard to do these plant-based diets and do everything, perfect for themselves. Why would you add something it literally says
so
artificial,
right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a synthetic, it's an artificial ingredient. I don't think we fully understand yet what the impacts are. And so I encourage, if you are going to sweeten something, to use a little bit of a natural sweetener, whether it's a tiny bit of honey or a tiny bit of, something like that, maple syrup, but use very, very small amounts. And then we talk about other ways to flavor. So using, citrus or flavors like that to flavor your water, mint, there's so many things you can use instead of sugar. Because the problem is, especially if you're used to artificial sweeteners, they're so much more sweet than sugar.
So concentrated.
Yes, it's so concentrated that you would need so much sugar for your body to think you're getting, and for your taste buds to recognize it as being as sweet as what you're used to. So it's really hard to go from, all these packs of Equal or whatever it is in your iced tea to just like a little sugar. It's never going to taste right. So sometimes we just pick a different drink altogether. And there's so many great alternatives, like all these new sparkling water drinks that are available that are naturally sweetened, and they're so good.
In front of Laura right now, she has a blueberry sparkling Waterloo.
It's so good. Spindrift is another brand that's getting more popular. They use just a tiny bit of the actual fruit, like grapefruit or lemon or lime or whatever it is. So it has like 5 calories just from that little bit of juice that they use. But again, you're getting a great flavor and very, very small. It's like 1 gram of sugar.
Something I'll recommend too. Well, first of all, when people are doing what you were just saying, that the tea, if it's like a Crystal Light tea, or a lot of these yogurts are so artificially sweetened,
Yes.
or basically or coffee is so either sugar sweetened or artificially sweetened, and basically people become accustomed to these things tasting more like candy than actually tasting like the yogurt is supposed to taste like, or the coffee or the tea. Like you're basically disguising the flavor of what that food even is. And so if you're adding packets and you're adding 6 sweetened lows or equals to it, at least start by maybe cutting it in a third less, and then do that for a few days, and then a third less. Or if you're buying it already pre-sweetened, then you can also go halvesies. So you may be buying the artificial yogurt that you really like, and then we would say, well, no, we really like the Fage Greek yogurt because it's really pure. It's the authentic Greek yogurt. Go halvesies, and kind of mix some of your stuff that we would roll our eyes about into like the other, and at least get a little bit of that to help. And then you can kind of gradually start to move. And that can help if you feel like something like our solution of something like that tea in the pitcher feels like it's too much of a step away.
Absolutely.
You can at least kind of take these gradual steps, because it really on that, it is truly retraining our taste buds and our brain.
Yeah, and it can take up to about 3 months for that process to happen. So I do the coffee negotiation on a regular basis.
It's such a negotiation.
Yes.
Yeah. Some people have thought, I think they might cry, as we're having that conversation, Yes. And I'm like, this is when it's getting bad,
Right. So if we haven't turned you away with the, the alcohol and everything else we've said so far, now we're taking your coffee
and your sweeteners and stuff like that. What about the research on different sweeteners, like sweet and low in particular, linked to bladder cancer?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting and something that just gets kind of buried.
Yeah.
So it's one of the really, good reasons why I just think, kind of like how I said the opposite before, if there's a potential benefit from flax seeds, then I'm going to go for it. If there's a study out there that says, that these artificial sweeteners might lead to bladder cancer, gastric cancer, whatever it might be, then why would I do it?
Have there been good studies, well-designed studies on other sweeteners that you turn to that show negative effects like that?
Not that I'm aware of. I think, again, that it's something where we've kind of just said, okay, these are safe because in all these like animal models and everything else, it's cleared all of that. And so then we therefore have just assumed the safety.
And a lot of times when it's done in animals, it's in such high doses. It's far higher than what we would normally as humans consume and relative to body weight and stuff.
Right. And I don't think there's been enough like well-designed, well-controlled studies looking at artificial sweeteners. It'd be very difficult to do a study like that because it would take a very, very long time.
Yeah.
That's why nutrition research is actually just so difficult and why there's all this information out there. Like I said, at the beginning, whether it's good, bad, or in between, we grab these little morsels from all these different studies, but a lot of studies are not well designed or well controlled. And to do a good nutrition study takes a very, very long time because it takes so long to see what the response actually is in the body. Very, very infrequently can you get, some kind of immediate result that you can say, with certainty that this is it. This is the thing that works.
And in human studies like that, people are self-reporting.
Yes.
Because for this very long time, they're not going to be living this metabolic chamber where you're controlling everything. They're on their own and stuff. So let's talk a little bit more about supplements. We talked a little bit about flax, but what are some of the other supplements that have some science behind it that shows it may help with prevention of breast cancer?
So one of the supplements, I think just for cancer in general, is curcumin, and that's where turmeric comes from. So you mentioned turmeric's in your smoothie or not your smoothie, but your vegetable juice. That's something that, gets a lot of attention. It's a very, powerful antioxidant in the body, and it has some awesome effects, but like we like to do in the US, we like to stuff it in a pill and take it that way,
right,
which is not the way that it's actually meant to be used. And so what I usually talk about with my patients is that, in cuisines that use turmeric, that's where we see the benefits. And so we need to use these the way they are meant to be used. So more in cooking. So, if you're making curries or something like that, and a lot of people don't realize, you need black pepper to absorb it. You also need some sort of fat, so in like Indian cuisine, for example, there's a lot of either like milk or yogurt or coconut or cashew. There's all these fats, and all of that helps with the absorption as well. So when you're just swallowing a pill, you're not going to get the benefit.
And then the benefit of it is that it is linked to a reduction in risk of all types of cancer.
It's hard to say, just blanketly sure. I think it's part of that, plant-based diets because you incorporate these herbs into the cooking, which is something I didn't really talk about before, but there's so many potential benefits, not just for cancer, but for other inflammatory illnesses as well. I think you can just say for cancer prevention, it's one of the things that you should be incorporating.
Okay. And when we look at its benefit on inflammation and how that can help people with joint pain and other issues, even better. And talk to us about vitamin D.
Yeah, so vitamin D, I think, is really interesting. We used to just talk about vitamin D for bone health, and, it didn't have the proper attention that it should have, I don't think. We're now finding out it has a huge role in the immune system. And if you have a deficiency, which most people in the US do, unfortunately, it's really important to correct it because we're even seeing, right now with COVID-19 that the people who have a better, like healthy vitamin D status are doing much better. And it's the same thing with, with oncology and cancer. For example, one thing is bone marrow transplants. There's some good data coming out that those who have an adequate vitamin D going into their transplant are doing better. So there's this really important role that it seems to be playing in the immune system and your ability to recover from these major, illnesses and, major, events that you're going through. And so vitamin D is something I think that is worth supplementing, especially if you know that there's a deficiency.
And supplementing specifically with vitamin D3.
Correct. Yes.
And you can have your levels checked too if you're not sure. You can ask your physician.
Exactly. It's something that your primary care physician can just order. It's probably something everyone should get checked with their annual physical just to see where you're at.
Do you know, I hear a lot of pushback from physicians about that.
Really?
It's shocking to me because to me it's like, well, why not?
Absolutely.
Just rule it out. And even though, yes, we're here in the South, we have a lot of direct sunlight. A lot of people aren't outside a lot.
Right.
And so
it's too hot.
Why not just check it? Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, there's just so many things that are coming out now about the importance of having a good vitamin D status. I think it's really, really important.
So
but
the
you
message
also,
here would be communicate with your physician. Sorry to
yes,
interrupt.
no, that's
but
okay.
If your physician kind of gives you the eye roll, which I get the eye roll from them, like not my personal physician that I'm asking, but as I'm speaking with other physicians about different, things that we're doing with patients in common and stuff, they'll say, they get the pushback, oh, everybody wants their D checked. And it's like, well, it's okay.
Right.
It's empowering people to know what to ask for,
Right.
Yeah.
And, it can be dangerous to just start supplementing on your own because, just like, not having enough is bad. Having too much is bad too. There's definitely a curve there. And, if you have too much vitamin D, then you can have hypercalcemia. So, you have to be careful with these things. You don't want to just go buy a 50,000 unit. Yeah, exactly. And start taking it every day. So another thing I get asked about a lot is a lot of different questions about mushrooms and mushroom powders. And so I usually encourage people to incorporate mushrooms into their diet regardless. One of the things a lot of people don't realize is that mushrooms should always be cooked. When they're raw, they can actually become carcinogenic. So when you're including mushrooms as a regular part of your diet, make sure you're cooking them. And a variety is key. So you don't just want to eat just portobellos. You want to eat a lot of different mushrooms. So getting some of the mushroom like blends or mixes at the grocery store is a great idea. If you don't know a lot about mushrooms, I don't encourage you to go foraging around on your own because there's a lot of poisonous ones out there.
I have some growing in a pot out in our garden that I keep plucking and they keep coming. They're very prolific in there.
Yeah, exactly. So, but in terms of powders, again, and capsules and all that kind of stuff, if you can get it in the diet, that's ideal. Some of the powders can potentially have some benefit as well. It's just one of those things you really want to talk to either a dietitian or your, oncologist about before you start taking. There are definitely certain types of mushrooms that have more benefit than others, and then certain ones that have shown interactions with chemotherapy. So it's just something we have to be a little mindful of.
And what is the benefit that's shown with mushrooms when it comes to cancer and cancer prevention?
So some of it is that antioxidant effect. Some of it is actually like a better tolerance with your treatment. So like increased energy, even less of like almost like a mental fatigue. So you talk about like chemo brain or like that foggy brain. So some of that, like the increased mental like sharpness. And then just prevention in general. I don't know all the mechanisms of the different mushrooms and how they work. But I think it's, again, something worth incorporating into the diet.
And it gives that culinary creativity and a multivitamin.
Oh, yeah. So multivitamins, I think, can have a place, particularly with people who are having trouble eating for a while. So maybe they're getting sick with their treatments and their diet might be really limited, or it might be, hardly anything at all for long periods of time. That's when the multivitamins can be really useful. But in terms of just like general, should everybody take a multivitamin every day? If you're following all these recommendations and following this, colorful, rich plant-based diet with a lot of variety, then there's absolutely no reason to take it.
But if you feel like you are kind of in that rut, then taking it for insurance is fine.
And I've had people say it's like really picked up their energy, probably because they were deficient. And, it's extremely difficult, time consuming and costly to do vitamin studies.
On every single nutrient. Right.
Exactly. And so unless we have some big fear of a specific deficiency, we don't do routine like vitamin checks. And so, if there's an easy way to do that, it'd be great. But, exactly. If you feel like you are in a rut or you've been in a rut for a while, you might notice that if you start taking a multivitamin that you're going to have that like boost in the energy.
And a multi is one that I'll typically recommend, unless someone has a specific reason not to. I do recommend it to pretty much everybody to take just as insurance. Also, because a lot of people are, if they're doing lower carb, well, you might not be getting the B vitamins or the different things that are in maybe those grains because you're cutting back on those. And, so, I feel like it's not expensive and it's not risky. All right. So we have talked a lot. We've talked sugars. We've talked white carbs. We've talked the deal with alcohol, with soy, with breast cancer, which types of fats, what's the deal with tea, supplements. Like there's a lot to take in with this. Physical activity. So lots, I think, for our listeners to kind of digest and kind of think about. All of these things don't have to happen at once. And, taking a close look at your diet, your lifestyle, and seeing maybe where's your biggest gap. and where do you have the most room for improvement?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. So the way I usually do it is I start with, like you said, maybe the one place we can make the most improvement with, I don't want to say not a lot of effort, but it's a very, specific thing that we can target that's going to do the most good and do the most harm reduction. So for someone that might be alcohol, if they're a daily drinker, then really taking, like you said, a hard look at that alcohol intake, that'd be a great place to start. For someone else, it might be sugar. They might drink sweet teas, sweetened coffees, etc. That's a perfect place to start. You can make a huge impact right there. And then once you feel comfortable when you've made those changes, then you start to tease the diet piece out. And if you already do great with your drinks and you're not drinking alcohol, then we start looking at some specifics with the diet, maybe making half of every meal vegetables, or something like that. And yeah, you don't do this overnight.
Right.
They just tease out one thing at a time and look for where you can make the most impact the quickest.
And things that are kind of part of our daily habit, looking at them to see, okay, this is my daily habit. This is my routine. Is there a way I can make this even a notch better for me?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I've even had people go so far as to drive a different way to work to avoid like their trigger.
I've had that too. Yes. I remember one lady in particular told me it wasn't cancer related. It was just she was struggling with her weight. She said when she had a really bad day at work, she would drive a different way specifically so she didn't pass the bakery with the drive-through on the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. Being really mindful of these things. So any kind of final takeaways overarching that you would leave our listeners with?
Sure. I think it's really important to work with a team that understands your specific case. So breast cancer has so much research out there. There's, been a lot of funding behind it because unfortunately so many women are diagnosed with breast cancer. There's just the most out there. But, whether you have estrogen receptor positive or negative, or whether, you have these other receptors that are positive or negative, or you might have something called triple negative. It's so important for your team to understand you and your case to give you the right recommendations. Because, we talked overarching recommendations, but there's even more specifics based on if you're younger or older than 50 and if you have, one type of breast cancer over another. So it gets really, really specific. And so it's really important to work with someone who understands those nuances.
And I really love your approach that you are starting with things that are going to be kind of gentle with them, meeting them where they are, and giving them kind of the idea of what to expect as things unfold. And here's going to be our game plan, but let's don't beat ourselves up if we're not seeking that, if we're not achieving that perfection that we are striving for.
Yeah. And none of us are perfect.
Right. Fantastic information. I'll include the links to a lot of this that Laura and I talked about. I'll also include a link of where to find Laura at our Ochsner Cancer Institute. And I really appreciate you spending so much time and really breaking all this down for us.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
A tremendous thank you to Laura for spending so much time with us, for doing this 2-part podcast for us. There's a lot that I've learned through our conversations, and I hope that a lot that you've taken away as well. And as always, stay in touch with me. Let me know what you think as you incorporate some of these strategies in your own life, if you have already incorporated them, or if you have other tips and things that work for you, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.